my net deckers. It's your boy, the Rare Hunter, and today we're here with a Kayo deck tech. This past weekend, I was at the Calling LA, and I played Kayo to a 9-4 finish, ending at 33rd. I wasn't qualified for the Pro Tour this season, so I had a little less stress preparing for the event, and it's a bit of a shame because I kind of enjoyed the heavy hitters draft format. However, I still really enjoy Kayo in general, and it was one of the big reasons why I decided to play this deck. Kayo is a new brute from heavy hitters, and I think most people know that Kayo is one of the stronger decks going into the format. I think in my own tier list, I placed him in the A tier, probably the first best hero that's not offensive. Offensive as in Kano and Dromai being just way better than everything else in the format. They are kind of breaking the fundamental rules of Flesh and Blood in a way. And so I think Kayo is one of the best, and Dorinthia and Kassai are also really good, but Dorinthia and Kassai, the warriors, are not as good into these S tier heroes, the Kano and the Dromais. So I played Kayo. I tested Kayo a lot more than I usually do anyway. And so that there's a couple other decks. I was also testing Dromai, but in the end, I think Kayo was a deck that I found to be the most fun, and I also just put in a good amount of work for the deck list, I guess. So I have some opinions on this hero that I'd like to share, and I'll tell you a little bit about my tournament experience. So starting off, we have the usual loadout. Kayo only has one arm. That's part of his ability here. All your 5s or 6s for brute stuff, but one arm, so you can only play one Mandible Claws. And that's to balance the Blood Rush turns, because all of a sudden you have a much deeper brute card pool compared to something like Rhinar. One of the big reasons to play Kayo is the insane fridge that he has. 2 block on the Scowling Flesh Blag, and then 6 more blocks here means you have a total of 8, along with the Tunic. If towards the end game, Tunic is pretty cool because in this deck you do a lot of 2-card hands, and the Tunic gets you 3 more damage. So a blue with a 2-card with a blue with a Wild Ride would be 6 damage. You discard a 6 off the top of your deck, make a Might, so that's 7, and then using the Tunic resource and the remaining floating resource, you have Mandible Claws for 3. So that's pretty good. I think there are some games where I found that Tunic wasn't as helpful. Tunic helps make your turns with agility tokens better. And then for those other cases, against other aggro decks or mirror match, you have the Hardened Cross Trap. Hardened Cross Trap is fantastic because what I found was when you have a low resource hand, say you were only able to keep 1 card, being able to use Hardened Cross Trap for 2 resources and then throw Command and Conquer is still a fine play occasionally, but then Hardened Cross Trap helps extend your Blood Rush turns to be the potential 4-card or 4 attack Blood Rush. So those are the main things. And then lastly, we have the AB package. So this is the deck. This is the loadout for me for against Kano. AB3 between Skullhorn and the Northern Gloves, and then an extra Spell Fray leggings. Spell Void was kind of free. Originally, I actually had a couple of 3 No Fears, but then I cut one of the No Fears for Spell Fray leggings, so that basically you're kind of just opening with this. You're starting with your No Fear on the battlefield, and so this loadout was fantastic for me. I went 3-0 against Kano, which was one of the reasons I wanted to play Kayo is I did not want to lose to Kano, and I also wanted to have an okay matchup against Dromai. Dromai ended up being a pretty close matchup, but I did beat 2 Dromais as well. So that's the equipment loadout. Some tokens. We have your Quicken token that you give your opponent when they block your swing big, a couple of agility, a couple of might, and then I have some action points. So starting with the deck, I'm playing 9 agile windups. I think these like 5 to 6 are pretty standard. Just fantastic as a blue, and lets you convert like awkward hands into incredible hands. But the red agile windups was something that I think I saw some other players playing. Originally, I was just really big on assault and battery because it blocked for 3. But assault and battery, I noticed that like you don't get the agility if you don't have a 3-card hand, which is pretty problematic. And you need it to be like a blue plus assault and battery plus another card. So it's very specific. And I really hate 3-cost cards in this deck, just because like you can't really, you really want to do more than one thing a turn with your 4 cards, right? So the 3 costs means that you're probably just going to like wild ride and then swing a 3 cost, but like you kind of miss out on that 1 extra claw swing without your tunic mana. So agile windup was something that I tested, and the more I tested it, the more I liked it. I should say that I started with Clash of Agility and then moved on to like assault and battery. Like Clash of Agility and assault and battery were like competing for similar slots, and then I ended up on agile windup. I think agile windup has a lot of things going for it because assault and battery and agile windup are both 3 for 7, and so on their attacking case they're the same. Agile windup cannot block as well, but at least it still blocks for 2. But the big thing is that you don't need 3 cards to make an agility token. You could, always just discard it if it's your last card. Like say you Savage Feast, discard a random card, swing with Claw. The card that you drew off of Savage Feast could be like just like this red windup, and if it was a red assault battery, you'd have to arsenal it. But agile windup means that you can just discard it immediately and then generate your agility token for the next turn. It's just really flexible as a red, and that's why I like it. Next up, we have some agility payoffs in Savage Feast, Runner, and E-Strike. I'm going to start with E-Strike because this is the card that I actually hate the most in this deck. Every Pro Tour list, the top 4 Pro Tour list, plays this card. I think this card is fine. It's pretty good when you have it with Cast Bones, but then any of these cards are great with Cast Bones. Any of the cards in your deck are great with Cast Bones when you hit the agility token, right? The worst part is when you have Enlightened Strike and you don't have Enlightened Strike, but you draw it off of your Blood Rush Bellow turn. And then you're like, oh, this card doesn't actually attack as well. Or like now you have to, if you have the agility token, you have to sink a card and then you draw a random card. Now you can't really predict what your turn is going to be, I guess. Like, I just really think that this doesn't play well. It reminds me of Chain. Chain didn't really play Enlightened Strike because you really want to use your blue pitch, right? Like you would rather pitch a blue and swing with something and have that 1 mana floating, 1 resource floating, as opposed to just like using 2 cards and then getting no mana left over. This almost feels like it's a 3 cost when you play it like that. I know that E-Strike with an agility is fantastic, and I don't disagree. But I think maybe it was my playstyle. I just didn't really like Enlightened Strike, and it punished me several times over the tournament when I drew it off of Blood Rush and it didn't get the +2, and then and then like the worst part was when I drew like all 3 of these plus another red in my match against Boltyn. We were both down to single-digit life. I think I actually was a little higher. I was probably at like 11 or 13, but that meant that I couldn't block 3 cards. I had to block only 2 cards and then send back an Enlightened Strike. And it just like forced me into these really awkward play patterns that I really didn't like for this deck. Then we have like just Runner and Savage Feast. These cards are both great. Runner helps you float your agility token to the next turn, and it's also a brute card, meaning that it gets powered up by Blood Rush Bellow. The only downside for a Runner is that if you lead with this, you can't immediately go into Claws because Claw won't have Go again because you didn't discard a card this turn. So it's a little worse than something like Wild Ride sometimes. But if you're able to say like Runner into Wild Ride into Claw, it's still fine. Savage Feast is just being a 1-cost card makes it pretty fantastic. If you lead with this plus a blue with your agility turn, you still have enough resources to play like a swing big or just come in with claw. So Savage Feast is fantastic. Actually, I'm curious why we don't maybe try to play some yellows, but that was not something I tested. I think the E-strikes could potentially come out for yellow Savage Feasts. But I don't really like having too much of a density of cards that require you to discard, like traditional Rhino cards that require you to discard first before you attack. Then we have 3 swing bigs. I actually sold my non-foil playset at the venue because they were buy listing at 24. But yeah, 3 swing big and 3 bear fangs. These are your 2-card 8s, and they could come in for 2-card 10 pretty easily if you make 2 mites on the previous turn. These are just really efficient attacks. One blocks and one is a popper, but bear fangs makes a mite for the next turn. So these are just fantastic. And then we have all of our non-blocks that we're playing. So I'm playing all 9, and I think most of the Pro Tour players are also on all 9 of these. Wild Ride is just the better one because this pulping loses to a defense reaction from the arsenal. But luckily I was never punished this weekend. But the dominate from pulping, it helps end games. I think one of the games against Azalea, they codexed me, and I put pulping into the arsenal, and even with the fragile token? I don't remember what it was called. The frailty token, that's what it was. Even with the frailty token, I was able to keep 1 card in hand and then send a dominated pulping back at them, and they were at 1, so they couldn't do anything. But yeah, your best hands after playing the deck for 1 or 2 games, you realize is just Wild Ride, discarding a card, right? And then into Claw, so it's Wild Ride, 2 blues, and then another 2 cost that you have, being 3 attacks off of 4 cards. If you have an agility token, Bear Fangs also starts this chain, which is pretty nice. The important thing is the discard that gives the Claw go again. And if you don't have the discard, something like if you have the agility token, like I said before, with runner, or it's just swing big, you go swing big, and then if you have a different card to continue the chain. Still, these are your best plays. And then rounding out some of the reds, we have Pack Hunt. This card has been fantastic for me, and Command and Conquer. You'll notice that all my attacks in this deck, all my red attacks are 2 costs. I pretty much cut all of the, I guess for fun cards, Massacre was a big one for me, and Savage Beatdown, I think, was some of the cards that I tried, but I ended up not liking. Just because, you really want to have that extra resource floating from the blue to use multiple cards. And the 2 math just works the best. Pack Hunt is good even in the mid game. It prevents your opponent from blocking optimally. And there's multiple times where my opponent got screwed over by the Intimidate, and they had to block with a card that they didn't want to block with. Command and Conquer is the usual. I think it's particularly good in this deck because when you generate a might, even a 2-card hand, Command and Conquer for 7 is really annoying. It eats an armor piece. Sometimes they don't even have armor left. But yeah, Command and Conquer also at the end of the good, your best hand is pretty great as well. The last 5 reds in the deck are 3 Cast Bones and 2 No Fear. I think I mentioned earlier, No Fear is, I was playing 3, but then now I'm down to 2 because I cut 1 for the Spell Fray. And Cast Bones, I think this card is actually, most people play it. I think it's a little controversial, but basically this card is great for when you want to damage stack, and it's good against stuff like Guardian, Warriors, any fatigue strategy. And then I kind of cut it for when I wanted to be more consistent because, Cast Bones, revealing more Cast Bones or Blood Rush Bellow kind of sucks, and also your opponent knows what to play around on the future turn. The main thing is you really, really, really want Cast Bones to be your agility maker. But Cast Bones gives you a really high ceiling with the deck. Also, it blocks for 3, which is pretty fantastic. Moving on to the yellows, the usual Blood Rush, Bellow. Tunic helps you fix this +1 mana on the math, and yeah, not much to explain about this card. Beast Within, this is your super high roll card. Sometimes you just mill it, sometimes you just discard it, and then you get an extra card. A nice thing to do is with Blood Rush Bellow, if you have the blue already and a random 4th card, you could block with the 4th card, pitch blue, Blood Rush, guaranteed discard the Beast Within, and you're back at 4 cards. That play I like a lot if you already have a 2 attack in the arsenal, like Swing Big, Bare Fangs, or Wild Ride. Just because you can like make use of the extra 3 block in your hand and just really outvalue your opponent. And lastly, we have Send Packing. This is one of the only 3 costs that I kind of accept playing in my deck. Just because 6 Command and Conquers is really, really good, and Send Packing, there's a lot of utility to it as well. With Tunic, you can go like your Wild Ride, Claw, and then Send Packing. But I think this card makes Tome of Fyendal a little unplayable in this format. I think one of the Dromai players I played against had Tome in their decks against me, just because I think like there's only so many slots in the deck, and if you choose to play Tome, you might not be able to side it out against Brute. So yeah, this card was fantastic. I even hit a Tome of Fyendal against Kano, and so that took away their whole turn if they had to like block or lose their Tome from Arsenal. This also clears the way, if you already have the agility token, it clears the way for pulping, so that even if they block out and then they get the defense reaction back into their hand, pulping will still be dominated, and then it will keep the go again because they can't block with 2 or more cards. And then we move into the blues. 3 Mighty Windup. Now we're just maxed out on 12 windups here, and basically it's great when you're going second and great when you're going Mighty Windup in particular is okay when you're going first, but the 3 or the 9 agile windups make it great when you're going first or second, because you don't have to help filter your opponent's hand. Wrecker Romp, this is probably one of the worst blues in the deck, but we play it because it's one of the only 6s. This matters for your Phantasm popper count, and blocks for 3 still. And the big thing is that you really don't want to get trapped with this card in your arsenal, or like need to play it late game, because it's one of the traditional Rhino cards that you have to discard a card first in order to play it at all. And this is another one of the things why I didn't really like E-Strike, because a lot of the decks that I liked E-Strike with were decks that was happy to E-Strike, draw a card, arsenal. And in this deck, you have a lot of terrible cards that you don't want to arsenal. Basically, any of your blues you do not want to arsenal. So, these blues are probably just another, like, basically your best blues. Or I guess I should say that, like, KO deck building is relatively straightforward, and it's kind of obvious what the best blues are, and I guess there are some utility ones, but these ones are just like generically good. These ones make it so that when you're going first, you get to generate tokens. So that's about it. This is probably your best blue. Late game, this intimidates and it just ends the game. I had a test game where against Bravo, I was able to play like 2 or 3 of these back to back in the late game. So yeah, they're fantastic. Intimidate's really, really good. And it's great as well because like in Reinhardt, this doesn't really come up as much. Like you'd have to pitch stack it, but like these just naturally just go to the bottom right. So in the late game, you'll just happen to have 4 blues. And if you have 2 blues and 2 Smash Instincts, if you have the agility token, if you roll scabs, you could just go like double Smash Instinct, and then that'll be just way too much damage. And then lastly, 2 riled up and 2 reckless swings. Or sorry, 2 riled ups and 1 reckless swing. You probably noticed that this deck was made with like 3 of everything pretty much, except for like 2 no fear. And that was like one of the big reasons that I was pretty happy with my deck construction towards the end of it. I think this deck is like really good for net decking, funny enough, and I think Peter Ward had like a very similar like ratio in the top 8 of the Pro Tour, but like I just wanted to have like 3 of everything so that when you swap cards out, everything's a 3 of except for the No Fear. I just couldn't find like the right slot, I guess. But yeah, Riled Up is just, to me, the next best blue, just because it can be a 6 in the late game with either a wind up or like a wild ride that you pitched. Compared to stuff like Reincarnate, I had it in the deck originally, but it felt like I didn't really need that that extra blue to win the game. And Pack Call, I don't think I really like that card, because I think if I blocked with it and I revealed a Blood Rush Bellow and it went to the bottom of the deck, I would be really not too happy with that. But yeah, one Reckless Swing. I actually never won any games with this Reckless Swing. There was a game against Bravo where it could have came up, but I killed them anyway, and I had the Reckless Swing in the arsenal. But I think decks like say like Warrior, they play stuff like Slap Happy and stuff that can prevent the next 2 damage. So Reckless Swing is not nearly as good as before, and it's a huge miss. I had multiple 50-50s with the Reckless Swing over the weekend that were like not favorable for me. Like I think I had against a Kano, I almost lost the game just because I went pulping and then flip over a draw card, and then they discarded the Reckless Swing in the 1 and 3. So I actually might just cut this for the third Riled Up, similar to how Peter Ward played. Almost like very similar ratios with 0 Reckless Swing. I think you have the benefit of people thinking that you will play Reckless Swing anyway, and then like they're playing around it, but then like you just don't have it. So that's pretty much the deck. I think overall my tournament experience was pretty good. I went 3-0 against Kano, 2-0 against Dromai. I lost against Kassai and Decimator Dori, and I lost against Levia, and I'm trying to think of what the last deck I lost to was. But yeah, I beat like pretty much all of the decks that I expected to beat, and then I didn't face any KO, which I thought was really weird. I think there was like KO was the most represented at the calling, and I didn't play against a single KO. But I think KO is a really fun deck. I definitely would play KO if your meta is not filled with warriors. The warrior matchup is very difficult, and just because they play the value game better than you, even though you do have like a fallback mid-range value game of blocking 2, swinging back 8. Kassai just does that way better, and Dorinthia also has a huge amount of armor, and you just can't block them very well, so they can stack their tokens very easily on their Dawnblade. Also, the hatchet variants aren't great either, and the Decimator Dori I played against was built with much better numbers against KO specifically. So yep, I think that is pretty much all I really wanted to cover for this deck tech. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. And go ahead and leave some comments if you have any questions in the comment section. I think I will be posting the February link in the description, and probably have some common sideboard matchups posted as well. And that's it. Thanks, guys.